Hello and welcome to this episode of I Don't Know Jack About Parenting, where today I'm going to be talking about Kobe Bryant. Not the basketball player, but the storyteller.
So the big question is this: how are parents like us, who don't have a manual, who are doing the best we can, who feel as though we aren't enough, how are we going to raise healthy, happy children who we are proud of and still keep our sanity in that process? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Ryan Roy, and welcome to I Don't Know Jack About Parenting, a podcast for parents who are being real with themselves.
Hello and welcome back to this episode of I Don't Know Jack About Parenting, where today I'm going to be talking about Kobe Bryant. Not the basketball player, but the storyteller. First off, I'm going to preface this with I'm not a big basketball fan. And I know, based on the news and things that have been said since his passing here in the last week, it's been less than a week at the time of this recording, that he affected so many people in so many ways. And I would say the majority of those ways were positive. Obviously, just being a human being in the United States who has a love of people who know how to succeed, study people who succeed. He's just not one that I had studied. I have an appreciation for the discipline and the mindset that it takes for someone to reach the heights that he reached in so many different ways. Having said that, I'm not one who watches the news. Therefore, I wasn't getting as bombarded with all of the Kobe news that was going on. But I do subscribe to some podcasts outside of my own. And there was an interview by Lewis Howes. So if you aren't familiar with him, go look him up. And in episode 409, he interviewed Kobe Bryant about a year ago, where he has transitioned from basketball player to, as he describes it, storyteller. Why am I sharing this on a I Don't Know Jack About Parenting podcast? Because I'm going to tell you. Kobe, as he was being asked about what he was going to do after he retired from basketball when he was around 36, 37, had sustained a major injury, and he started to ponder this after he went through an injury, and he said, man, this could be the end of my career. What do I do next? And he had a couple more years after the injury, but it really got him thinking about where he would go next and what he would do. And he decided he was going to look into certain business ventures, but more importantly, he said he decided he wanted to be a storyteller. And some of the quotes he said in his interview, he said, stories move the world. And I was like, wow, stories do move the world. What I do is I get on this podcast and I tell stories. But who's most fascinated with stories? See, I don't know jack about parenting, but I know when I open a book, my kids get engaged. And a book typically is a number of stories or one story put together, depending on the type of book, right? Sorry, my tripod kind of fell there. And we'll just leave it at this where it's at now so it doesn't fall again. And I thought to myself, I tell stories and my kids light up when they hear stories. Or I love to tell jokes, so I'll get my older son especially cracking up, and one of his friends went to Boy Scouts with us the other day, I had picked him up. His mom needed a little help, and so I brought both boys, and his friend says, "Do you have any jokes?" And he's like, "Dad, tell the one about the monkey and the lion. Hey, Dad, tell him the one about McDonald's. Hey, Dad, tell him the one about the bear and the rabbit." And as I'm going on these jokes, the kid is dying laughing. He goes, "You got to stop. If there's more to this joke," as I was telling one of the jokes, he goes, "You just got to stop now because I can't handle it anymore. I'm laughing too hard." And a joke is nothing more than telling a story with humor and inflection of voice. And if you could master, right, storytelling, if you could master the art of a joke, which I'm trying to get my kids to do, and the older one does a good job, but even the little one will tell a story his own little way. You can move the world. And that's what Kobe Bryant wanted to do outside of basketball. And as a matter of fact, as he was talking about this, and it bounces around in the interview, the guy says, "What is one thing that you have tried to master and haven't mastered yet?" And he pondered just for a second, and a big grin came across his face, and he goes, "I haven't mastered the art of telling the perfect story." And you could tell he studied storytelling. And he says, there's frameworks that have been around for centuries, and there's blueprints. And he goes, and then you got to put your own spin on it. And you have to, and he started describing, because he has a podcast, he started describing how he had to get voice actors for this podcast, who still, it's a children's story podcast, who still had the enthusiasm of a child in their inner self, so that could come across in the voice. It's just fascinating. So I guess why I wanted to share a different side of Kobe than many people are talking about now, is they're talking about the basketball player, is because that part of Kobe Bryant is something each and every single one of us can master as parents. And how do we do that? I would say read often to your children. Because when you're reading, you're telling stories. And the same books that I have, that I read to my current 8-year-old, I read to my 2-year-old, but I read them through a different lens. And I read them with more enthusiasm, because I need to make it interesting for me. And I just read them differently. Before I read, because I wasn't a storyteller myself, I would just read the words, and I would point to the pictures, and we would talk about it a little bit. But I will tell you, through repetition and telling stories myself, I now pull those characters off of the page, because I become the character. I don't read the words. And how did I get to that point? Is through repetition and becoming comfortable, and more importantly, confident in reading to my children in a way that makes it engaging for them. I'll share this with the audience. I've never considered myself to be a strong reader. I might get emotional here. I thank my children for teaching me to enjoy reading. I thank my children for empowering me to start reading out loud, because I never enjoyed doing it. When I was that kid in class that they were like, "Can you read out loud?" And I was like, "My throat hurts, I don't want to," or I just didn't have I didn't feel comfortable doing that in front of a group. And for me, a lot of things came easy, and when I heard other kids read out loud, they did it in my eyes better than I did. And I didn't want to show any weakness, so I'd rather take the 0 than read out loud. And it wasn't until I became a father that I became a better reader out loud, someone who consumed more reading because I read to my children. I enjoy and love reading now. But more importantly, back to Kobe, I've become what I consider to be, and I still have a ton of room to improve. I agree with him. There's no way to tell the perfect story, but I've become a much better storyteller simply because I've read more stories. And if you could read stories to your children and become engaged and infatuated with them, you may start writing or telling your own, or you may tell your own, even old stories of when you were a kid or things you did with more enthusiasm. And stories move the world. So because I wasn't a huge Kobe fan, but yet I listened to this podcast, and honestly, I went and watched about 20 Kobe videos last night. I, unfortunately, after his passing, have really become a huge Kobe fan in a very short period of time, but not for the basketball accolades, but for the focus to tackle something new, the determination to want to be the best at it. And the people, similar to me, that he wanted to impact were children through story. So I encourage you, parents, if you don't do it often, to put that as part of your daily routine, to read to your children and impact them through the power of story. I don't know jack about parenting, but that makes a lot of sense to me. We'll see you in the next episode.
Do you want to be the dad you wish you had? If so, go get my free book, Be the Dad You Wish You Had, at BeTheDadYouWishYouHad.com. Inside, you'll find my most effective 40 tips to quickly and easily transform yourself into the ideal dad. Go to BeTheDadYouWishYouHad.com now and get it while it's free.